Holy crap, we are back, people. So that did not go as easy as I had hoped for. Um, so here's the thing I found out. I just learned something new. In your BIOS, on easy mode or in hard mode, wherever it is, wherever you find it at, it's in both spots. If you activate the mode called Windows 10 WQHL or WHQL support and turn that on, what I just told you to do might not work perfectly. It's definitely not going to work perfectly because it would not let me modify my voltage inside of MSI Afterburner whatsoever. And when I first did that restart that you saw on the last video, my motherboard beeped at me a whole bunch of fucking times, like it does when my RAM was overclocked too high. So that scared the shit out of me right off. I knew something was wrong right off the bat. Um, because I had never had Windows 10 WQHL or whatever support turned on before when I've modified my BIOS and switched back and forth between them. It's only something that I recently even learned about from watching, what was it, Tech Deals? Yeah, Tech Deals. He mentioned it in one of his videos, and I was like, oh, I never turned that on. That makes everything run a little bit better. Okay, I'll activate it. Yeah, not if you're mining. Don't fucking have that on. So you might want to go check your BIOS and make sure that is not your real, your real BIOS, your CPU BIOS, not your graphics card BIOS, obviously. Make sure that shit is not turned on. Um, and if it is turned on, I couldn't get into my BIOS too. Once I restarted, I couldn't get back into my BIOS to turn it back off, unfortunately, because it was beeping at me, and then it would just like load right into Windows after kind of crashing a little bit. So if you already went through these steps and you were really following along right along with me without watching this video first, and you can't get back into your BIOS, what you need to do is just undo the steps that you just did real quick. Go back into your um, ATI, load up your original BIOS onto it, run the pixel patcher once, and then run it once again, maybe. If it says already patched, like if you run it as administrator, and it says already patched, restore from backup, click yes, and then run it again and patch it again, and then restart. Um, and, on the original BIOS, and then restart your computer, and everything should be fine. You should be able to get into your BIOS and turn off the Windows 10 WQHL support or whatever the fuck it is, and then go back, redo what I just told you to do. And once you boot up into here, you'll be fine. You'll be able to, modify your shit and all that kind of good stuff. So now that we have our BIOS modded, let's talk about overclocking. We're going to use MSI Afterburner. If you don't have MSI Afterburner, go download it. It's a free program. You don't have to have an MSI graphics card or motherboard or anything like that. It works for almost every card out there. And yes, see, now I can actually modify my voltage. This was disabled on the last one for some reason, or when I just did that modification, Windows 10 was like, nah, we don't recognize this graphics card the right way, so we ain't letting you touch that voltage none. Fuck yous. So that was kind of whack. That's where I knew something was really wrong. As soon as I loaded up MSI and I couldn't change this, I was like, ah, shit, here we go. Here's the problem starting. So, very simple fix though, at least, just deactivate that. Now that we're in here, MSI Afterburner is a great program. It's very simple. If you download it and yours pops up and doesn't look like mine does, it's in the settings. Go over to user interface, and in here you can switch between a whole bunch of different looks for MSI Afterburner. It all looks, but it's all the same numbers pretty much displayed the same way. Core voltage, power limit, temp limit, core clock in megahertz, and memory clock in megahertz. And those are all that matters really. So let's talk about what kind of gains you can get now that we have our BIOS modded, running NiceHash. That's what I use for mine, just because it's simple, it's easy, and I can do, I really don't have to tinker too much with it when I'm not at work. So if you're running NiceHash, if you never ran NiceHash before, you have to go into benchmark, and you need to benchmark your shit, and it will, figure out how fast your card runs and stuff like that. So what we're gonna do is right now it's sitting at stock. Anytime you load up at MSI Afterburner, unless you hit this, apply at Windows startup, it'll apply your settings. Don't ever click that. I don't recommend it. It's just not worth it, because if something goes wrong, then it's hard to get it back off. So don't ever apply to, Windows startup. Just overclock it every time you have to restart your Windows. Don't be lazy. So now that we're in here, we're gonna go ahead and I guess we'll just hit start to show you what it runs at its stock. Let's hit start. So it loads up my Kryptonite on my CPU, and I'm running on Ethereum only mode because it's not worth dual mining Decred and Ethereum right now. And we'll let this bad boy start up, and we'll see what kind of hash rate we start pulling out on stock speeds with just modding the BIOS. That's all we've done. And it looks like I'm sitting around 24.5 megahashes a second. I've seen a lot of people say that they're only getting, like 18 to 20 megahashes a second on their stock cards, not changing anything. Oh, fuck, I should have mentioned one other thing first as well if you have an RX card. So let's remember this number, 24.5. Let's hit stop. Let's close this. And, oh shit, I wonder if this is going to fuck with my video too, doing this. I guess we'll find out, huh? Let's go into gaming. So you open your AMD Radeon settings. It's almost always down here in your bottom right, and if it's not, you can right click on your home screen and click on it here and go into gaming up in the top, then go to global settings, and right in here for GPU workload, click here, and there's two different settings. Yours, if it's right after you downloaded your drivers, it'll automatically be set to graphics. So you can check these differences for yourself. You can run it as graphics and then run it as compute and see the difference between the two. It is very noticeable. I'm already on compute right now, and I really don't want to switch back and screw this video up and have to redo this whole video. But just know that you get way lower mega hashes per second if you're on graphics. You can't run games as good on compute, and you can't run mining as well on graphics. So just keep that in mind. So switch over to compute, flash your screen will turn black and flash a couple times and reset itself and blah blah. And then give it a second, AMD Radeon settings will pop back up and you can just close it. So now that I've at least mentioned that, so you know what to look for if you're not getting anywhere near 24, if you're down to like 18 and 20 and you modded your BIOS, you're like, what the fuck, Shade? You didn't tell me I was gonna be so far off, and yeah, it's not even close, bro. This is bullshit. So we're gonna go back into NiceHash. So if you're not getting 24-ish after your BIOS mod, just know that I do have an 8 gigabyte version. If yours is the 4 gigabyte, it might not run as fast, but it should be pretty damn close. And if you have an RX 580, it should be even faster. And let's hit start again and let this bad boy start up. And let's start overclocking it a little bit. Now, this is something I found too with this overclocking on this guy, is the best way to do it is in baby steps, because I know what my best settings should be. Like the best settings that I can reach on my card are these ones. These are my ideal settings to run this card at, somewhere right around in this area. But if I click yes right now and try to jump my core voltage way down and my speeds way up and all that kind of shit, this bad boy will crash. And it will cut my video out and I will have to restart my computer. So we're not going to do that. I just reset it back. This is reset back to stock settings right here. That thing is a godsend. You can go in and change your, fan curve and stuff like that as well too. I do recommend doing that. If you're new to mining, it's something that only take a couple minutes to learn. Go into fan, and you change, like down here is the temperature that it hits, and then over here is the fan speed that you want it at. So like at what is this? If it hits 50-ish degrees, in Celsius, I want it running at 40%. And if it gets all the way up to around 81 degrees, I pretty much want it running at 100%, which I'm not sure why it's not up at 100. It should be. Because if it gets to 82 degrees, that's insanely hot, and it needs to be running at its maximum temperature anyway. So I don't know why that was down a little bit. But tinker with your fan curves, learn that shit in the future, blah, blah. So right now we're running at 24 megahashes a second, 24.2. Usually my CPU runs faster than this too, but I'm assuming because I'm recording at OBS, my CPU, it's eating up probably about like 9%, 12% of my CPU by itself, just recording this. So it's making it run a little bit slower. Now, what we're going to want to do is undervolt our cards so that we're using up the least amount of voltage possible. And that'll be done up here in the core voltage. The power limit can kind of do that to an extent, but I've had a lot of issues with it crashing on me trying to do power limit undervolting. So let's start off, we're just going to drop down by about 79 volts, and you can see it over here in the megavolt meter that it dropped down quite a bit right off the bat. And we're going to go down a little bit more and click it, and that time it didn't drop. it actually starts bouncing around. So if it does that on you, that's usually how I've noticed, like what happens before it crashes. So I'm gonna bring my core clock down to about 1200, and bam, that helped it stabilize itself a little bit down a couple volts. And we're gonna go down to about negative 134. On NVIDIA cards, you can usually, from what I've seen on people's videos, you can only go down about 100. So you might have to baby step it down. And if you have a 560 or a 550 or anything like that, you might only be able to go down by 100 as well too. But mine seems to let me go down by 200. So I just baby step all the way down to 200. So I'm gonna go down to 134, and it moves me back to 131. There's certain, steps that it takes, and if you don't click on the right step, it'll just move you to the closest one. And again, it didn't move all that much, so I'm gonna drop my core voltage down just a tiny little bit, and bam, went down almost 50 megavolts on that one. So that was a good drop. Now, as you can see, what I'm doing right here really hasn't changed what our mining speed is at that much. I've dropped my core clock down quite a bit and my voltage down quite a bit, and yet our mining speed really isn't affected. So we're going to drop a little bit more and a little bit more. And since it's not reading and it's not moving, I'm going to make it read it and change my core clock again. And we're going to go to 197 just a little bit just to make it change, just so that it forces itself into changing its volts, And now we're at about 987. We started off, this thing usually was like 1150-ish, 1100, when it's running at full bore. But you can usually get it down to about 950 is where I like to make it sit at. So ideally, that's where we're going to aim for, is about 950. So we're going to go down some more. And since it did move, I'm going to make it move. 975. Go down a little bit more. Drop back down a little bit. 968. Now that we're this close to it, I'm going to go all the way. Hit yes. And just change the clock a little bit to make it recognize. All right, bam. So now I'm at 937. That's even lower than where I want to be, and that's perfect. So now that we have our voltage underclocked down to where at least, we want it, now it's time to overclock. In gaming, when you're overclocking for gaming, the core clock is what will make the most drastic of a difference in speeds or frames per second. But in mining, the memory clock is what's going to make the biggest difference in mega hashes per second. So this thing usually started off at about 1268. You see, I mean, even if I jump it back up to 1260, it really doesn't boost the mega hashes up that much at all. And you can't go crazy on the core clock with this, otherwise it'll just end up crashing anyways. So we're going to go back down to about 1203. It likes to sit around there. And we're going to jump this up by, let's say, 150, go up to about 1900, and click OK. Give it a second, and bam, went from mid 24s to high 25s now. 26s, even better. So just from that, we jumped up, quite a bit, over 1.5 mega hashes. So let's go up another 100 to 2000 and click OK. Give it a second. It's thinking. 27.6, not bad. Now I'm not positive if this thing's going to get up to my 31 like it usually does, since I am recording at the same time and everything and kind of fucking with it. But we're going to go up another 100 to 2104. Click yes. And she jumps up to 29.1. So now that we're getting up around 29:30, oh, it's bouncing around a little bit, and it'll do that, It tends to do that. Sometimes what I'll do to try and stable it, like if you're happy with this and you just want to sit right here, because now is where you start hitting the limits of, honestly, even a little bit before this, you start hitting the limits of the different cards. So from the 550, the 560, the 570, the 580, you might not be able to get up to this high of a clock on the lower cards. And on, even based on your card or the way, I don't know, what you did to it or what driver you have installed or something, you might not be able to get this high. But if you have a 570 8 GB or a 580, I would say 4 to 8 GB, you should be able to get up to this megahertz no problem, and get up around the 29 mega hash at least. So I know for sure I can get up about another 100 mega hashes up to 2200, and we're going to click OK. And she jumps up to, come on, over 30. Give it a second. Come on. I know you can do it. It's just being a little finicky. Well, it could be the difficulty fucking with me, but I think it's just mainly because I'm recording at the same time. It's putting a little bit of extra strain on it. But this is my preset right here at 2200 flat with 1210. And this will usually run me about 31 point something megahashes a second. So that's really all there is to it. Now you can try and play with, now here's where you play with your core clock. You know, if you want to try and drop your core clock way down, that, you know, so you can see it affect my megavolts here. Megavolts isn't the only rating though. You want to see like your actual wattage. Click down through your things here, CPU, oh wait, GPU. Hey, why isn't my wattage in here? Monitoring, power, and voltage. It should be, oh, it's just in a weird spot for some reason. That's weird, yeah, why would it be put all the way down there? Okay, so scroll down through, and right there, watts. So with this guy cranked down, and cranked up, it's pulling about 99 watts on average. Which, not too shabby. I've seen some people claim that they're running at 85 watts or 80 watts, and they're pulling 31 to 32 megahashes a second. You know, it might be possible, like I said from my other video, where you can modify, you know, the voltages inside of the BIOS for the card itself, but I just don't want to tinker with them. I just don't want to take a chance of really fucking something up that much in there to save 10 watts, you know, maybe 20 watts. Wattage is so fucking cheap here in Florida. I know, I mean, I understand that wattage versus hash rate, you know, is pretty much all that matters when it comes down to mining, but I don't want to break my card. And it's running good. I like it. It stays, as you can see, it's sitting around 55 degrees Celsius. My fan speed, I have it curved, so it's only running about 54% fan speed at around 55 degrees Celsius, which is really not that loud. I mean, I'll lean over here towards my fans real quick and see if you can even hear them on the mic. I don't know if you could even hear that, but it's not bad at all. It's nowhere near 100%. I don't need to run anywhere near 100% to keep it around 55 degrees. And I'm happy with 55, you know. I don't like it up and over 60, but when I was dual mining in the past, it would pretty much sit at like 60, 61 degrees, and my fan speed would have to sit quite a bit higher, about 59%. But that's pretty much all there is to it for overclocking, guys. Like I said, baby steps is the way to go. If you crash your card while you're doing this, you know, overclocking and undervolting, and trust me, I've crashed this fucking thing 5 million times tinkering with these overclocking settings and stuff like that. Screen goes black, gray, green, blue, red, weird fucking colors and shit like that. Sometimes it comes back, sometimes, most of the time it does not. Um, but yeah, it's an absolute pain in the ass sometimes, but it's worth doing, you know, to get the highest shit you can get and then run it at that all the time. A trick I do like to sometimes give it an extra like +1, +2 power limit. It seems to keep the mega hashes per second a little bit more stable, having that little bit of extra juice. But I could be wrong. I'm just. It seems like it does every now and then. It does allow it to pull an extra watt or two when it needs to, but it seems to keep the actual mega hashes per second a lot more stable as well. Now over here, as you can see, we're not pulling a lot of shares right now. Usually I'll average about 1.5 to 2 shares per minute, which is a pretty decent rate as far as I can tell. But as you can see here, only getting about $1.07 per day with these two running. But they're running a little slower than they usually do. Usually this guy's at about 180 hashes a second if I'm not recording, and it'll pull about 14 cents. And this guy's usually at about 31, pulling right around $1.02. So, what can you do? So that's all there is to mining. Now let's talk about overclocking for gaming. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna hit stop. And I'm gonna let it kind of cool down for a second. I don't want this video to crash. If it does crash, I'll just make a part 3 for gaming specifically. That might not even be a bad idea because I'm gonna try and have to switch my those Radeon settings back over to graphics to get the optimal, you know, performance and overclock and stuff like that for graphics. So it might crash anyways on us. We'll see. If it does, I'll cut the video. I'll chop the video there, and we'll make a part 3. So let's try and do that. Now that she's cooling down a little bit, I'm gonna switch all of my settings back to stock, and then reactivate my fan curve. so that it runs at my fan speed and not its low ass fan speed that lets my fucking. Just fair warning, if you try to let it run unstock, it will let your GPU get hot as a fucking bitch. I mean, when I was running it in like benchmarking and shit like that before I realized what a fan curve was and automatic, settings, um, it would let my card get up into fucking, high 70s, fucking pushing 80 something degrees. And I am not okay with that whatsoever. I mean, 90s, I think 90s thermal throttle. 90 is thermal throttle right here. And it was getting up into like 80, 81 running, what was it, Fire Strike? Yeah, Fire Strike. That bitch gets hot. So learn to do your own fan curves and stuff like that. It'll keep it running a lot cooler. Um, so now that that's reset, we are going to close and we're going to go back into our AMD Radeon settings and we're going to try and switch over from compute back into graphics. It might not even crash my whole computer. I mean, sometimes it does when I've ran for mining for, like a day and a half and I come back and try to switch it real quick. Sometimes it'll just crash and I have to, manually restart the computer anyways. But it might crash my recording trying to switch from compute to graphics because my recording might not know what the fuck it's doing. So I might see you here in a second, or I might see you on the next video. Let's see. Okay. Well, it blinkety blink blinked, and that's what happens. And it'll reload the AMD Radeon settings. And I'm looking here at OBS Studio, and there is absolutely nothing on the screen. So we are definitely going to have to make a part 3. Alright guys, I will see you over in the part 3 video.